There's a simple misunderstanding that trips a lot of people up with podcasts, and it's understandable. They look like radio, voices talking, episodes stacked in a list, play buttons everywhere. So the brain assumes the old rules still apply, and that assumption is where most frustration quietly begins. You listen when it's on, you catch what you catch, you miss the rest. That's how radio trained people to behave. Podcasts look similar enough that the habit carries over, even though the system underneath works completely differently and doesn't reward passive listening anymore. A podcast isn't radio with better graphics. It's radio that waits for you completely and patiently. It doesn't care when you arrive or how long you stay, but that only works if you know which few buttons actually matter. Without that, the apps feel cluttered and the shows feel longer than they need to be. The problem isn't the content, it's the lack of control, or more accurately, not knowing where the control actually lives inside the interface. I was reminded of this recently when my grandson tried to explain a podcast he likes. He was enthusiastic. I was nodding along. Somewhere around minute 3, I realized I'd already missed half the explanation because he'd moved on without warning. That wasn't his fault. The apps encourage that kind of jumping. They assume you already know how to steer, how to skip, how to adjust, how to recover when you miss something. If you don't, it feels like falling behind mid-conversation. We didn't used to steer audio at all. We planned around it. You knew when the show started. You knew when the news came on. If you missed it, you missed it. That model trained patience, but it also trained passivity. Podcasts flipped that arrangement without making a big announcement. What changed first wasn't content, it was control. You don't follow a schedule anymore. The schedule follows you, quietly adjusting to whatever your day happens to become. Commute gets shorter, you pause. Errands take longer, you pick up where you left off. None of that requires loyalty or commitment, just a few intentional taps. Once you notice that, the medium starts making more sense. The trouble is podcast apps are full of options, and most of them are distractions. You don't need charts, recommendations, or trending banners to listen well. You need a small set of controls that shape audio around your time. That's where the 7 essential buttons come in, not because they're advanced, but because they return power quietly. Follow filters noise, download handles weak signals, speed adjusts density, skip moves past filler. Sleep timer ends politely, chapters guide, cue decides what's next. Once you see podcasts that way, they stop feeling like another app to learn. They feel like a tool you already understand. Radio used to tell you when to listen. Podcasts don't. They wait, and with the right buttons, they stay out of your way. Once you understand that podcasts are built around control, the next frustration usually sounds the same. Fine, but where are the controls? Every app looks different. Each company stamps its personality everywhere, and the result is big episode lists, repeating ads, menus inside menus, and a maze that feels intentional. The good news is the 7 buttons don't move much. They're hidden under different names and icons, but they exist everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Amazon Music all want listening time. They just disagree on how visible the steering wheel should be to users. Start with follow, sometimes called subscribe. This is the quiet gatekeeper. In Apple Podcasts and Overcast, it's near the top. In Spotify, it's a plus sign. Following tells the app what matters. Until then, it assumes browsing instead of listening with intent. Download comes next, and it's about reliability, not storage. Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts make it obvious. Spotify and Amazon Music hide it behind a small arrow. Download means the episode plays without signal on planes, elevators, parking garages. It's insurance, not collecting files. Speed is the button people avoid, then quietly adopt. During playback, it's labeled 1x. Tap once and try 1.2x. That doesn't sound frantic, it sounds focused. Pauses shrink, conversations tighten, and you save real time without losing meaning or tone. Skip 30 seconds is modern fast forward. Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast all include it. It's how you move past ads, long intros, or sections that don't apply. Think cassette fast forward, except precise. One tap equals one clean, predictable jump forward. Sleep timer lives in the playback menu, often under 3 dots. It tells the app when to stop talking, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, end of episode. This matters for nighttime listening or repetitive tasks, preventing episodes from continuing long after attention is gone. Chapters are like CD tracks when a podcast includes them. Not all do, but when they exist, they're invaluable. Overcast and Pocket Casts show them clearly. Apple Podcasts supports them quietly. Chapters let you skip sections without abandoning the episode entirely. Finally, there's Q. This is your mixtape. Every app lets you line up what plays next, so you're not forced to decide repeatedly. One choice now replaces several interruptions later, and listening becomes continuous instead of constantly asking for permission. None of these buttons are advanced. They exist because people didn't want audio dictating their schedule anymore. They wanted it to fit between things instead of taking over. These controls quietly return that power without demanding technical knowledge or constant attention. Once you know where these buttons live in your app of choice, the clutter fades. Big episodes feel manageable. Repeats become optional. The app stops demanding attention and starts following instructions, which is how tools are supposed to behave in the background. That's the shift. Radio used to tell you when to listen. Podcasts don't. They wait. And with the right buttons in reach, they stay out of your way while doing exactly what you asked, on your time, without drama or getting lost. Once you reach this point, something subtle shifts. The apps stop feeling chaotic, and you stop feeling behind. Not because the technology changed, but because your posture toward it did. You're no longer reacting to whatever starts playing. You're deciding what happens next. There's a tendency to assume this kind of control belongs to people who enjoy tinkering. That if you weren't raised on apps, you're supposed to tolerate whatever defaults appear. That assumption doesn't hold up, because we've updated systems our entire lives. We learned to program VCRs that blinked 12 o'clock for months. We endured dial-up tones and learned patience the hard way. Compared to that, pressing 7 buttons is not a test of courage. It's light work done once, then enjoyed quietly. What actually changes is your sense of time. When you use skip without guilt, ads lose their power. When you use speed intentionally, long conversations stop crowding your day. At 1.2x or 1.3x, most voices sound normal, just awake, focused, and easier to follow. The sleep timer does something similar, but quieter. It removes the feeling that listening has to be finished properly. You don't owe an episode your full consciousness. Ending it automatically isn't rude. It's practical, and it prevents resentment toward a show. The habit that forms is calm and predictable. No scrambling to find where you left off. No annoyance at a voice continuing after you checked out. Listening becomes something that fits around your energy, instead of demanding completion or rewarding endurance for its own sake. Q might be the most underappreciated shift of all. It's the moment you stop being asked to decide every time something ends. One decision up front replaces a dozen interruptions later. That reduction isn't efficiency. It's relief from constant small choices. What's interesting is how quickly this changes your relationship with podcasts themselves. You stop collecting them, you stop feeling behind on a list. An episode you don't finish isn't a failure. It's audio that fit for a while, then didn't. This is where the pressure drops. The apps are designed to suggest more, faster, louder. Once you know how to steer, suggestions become optional. Charts fade into background noise. You're choosing what works for this stretch of time, not chasing everyone else. That's the real update. Not mastering an app, but refusing the idea that listening has to be optimized, archived, or completed. It only has to be useful, pleasant, and contained within the day you're actually living, without guilt, pressure, or unfinished mental tabs. Old dogs don't chase trends, they pace them. They keep what helps, ignore what doesn't, and move on without apology. Podcasts are no different. They're tools that should serve your day, not define it, or demand loyalty, attention, or constant participation. The perspective settles into something familiar and steady. You're not late to this. You're not catching up. You're doing what you've always done, adjusting the tools so they fit your life instead of the other way around. And that's enough for today.